and put them in Canton form.
The group is smaller, but now the real conversations are going to happen. All right, so this is our panel portion of our program, and I want to introduce. I always call them my friend, my good friends. But we've done a lot of good stuff together, and won some, lost some, right? And so I want to introduce Carissa for now. Carissa is what did the gentleman call himself? An enthusiast and an activist in Salinas. She just finished several years as assistant library director for the city of Salinas. Implement a lot of great programs and doing a lot of great stuff there. And now, starting Monday, she becomes the director for the Alisal Family Health Family Center. And it's a growing program, and she can talk about herself, what it does, and it's just growing resources for families at the school. She studied classical studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz.
Did you Google me? Did you get
Yes, I did. She's getting her PhD, and she's done, so she's Dr. Carissa Purnell. She's also married to apparently a up-and-coming singing star with Proyecto X, and now they've been on national television. And so, anyway, she's talented everywhere she goes, but she's also somebody who cares about this community. And now that she's in her new role, she's now considering a run for political office, which I'm very excited. We've been talking about it for a long time. So I said, not only do we need more women in office, but we need women with doctorates in office. So anyway, Dr. Carissa Purnell. She's going to be our moderator.
I feel like I came in mid-conversation, so I feel like I probably missed a little bit of things, but I came in at a good time because you guys were talking about young people. And so, like Sergio said, when someone asks you to do something, he's a friend, and that's sort of how we roll in Salinas. When someone asks you to do something, you do it, and I think that you all know that very well, that we work as a team together. So rather than do like long introductions, I just wanted to ask you guys, because when he told me the subject of it, I said, well, that passed like 50 years ago. Why are we having this conversation now? So my question, the first one to the three of you, is why after 50 years is this still significant, and why do we need to have this conversation?
We can take it in age order.
Well, okay, how about we leave the distinguished folks to finish the conversation, and we'll start with me, because I could do a real quick why this event is happening, and they could tell you why they're doing what they're doing and have done what they've done. So the reason why we're here is for that particular question. Why do we care? And I've had people tell me, the best of my friends tell me, who cares? Who cares? You know, I've been living in the past, right? They tell me, who cares? And the same thing would happen with the bracero exhibit. If no one had done anything about the 50 years would have gone by. Who cares about braceros, right? We never saw their faces. We didn't got their names. We don't know who they are. They're gone now. If anything, most of them are passed away by now. Same thing is true as the World War II exhibit. This is the 70th anniversary of the voting of the end of the war. They dropped nuclear bombs on hundreds of thousands of people, and we ended the war. So 70 years have gone by. Who cares? I would care. Why? Because my dad was a veterano. He was there on D-Day. He was there, Battle of the Bulge. He got shot 4 times. He got Purple Hearts, and he got a bunch of stuff he brought back. So when you talk about who cares, is that folks like us who care enough that we've done something significant in our community, we feel, and we want to pass that on to the next generation. It's important for us to do that, and we know the schools aren't doing that. And these are things that are important to us individually. So that's why this exhibit was here, set up for the entire month of August. And thanks to Sergio and his wife that they were able to get us a location for it, because it would have cost us a whole lot of money to do this. And we're getting it on the organizing skills that we have in our community, and the leadership and the resources. So we're thankful for that. So that's why me, Juan Martinez is here in particular, and then we've invited people, and people jumped out of the woodwork. We made some phone calls. Yeah, I want to be there. I want to be there. So what else is happening? And we looked around the state. We didn't see anything happening. So folks, when they got the phone call, they called back. oh yeah, I can make it here, I can make it here, I can make it here, but nobody can make it in one day, like we did the Bracero exhibit. So we said, well, great, he's willing to be here, and she's willing to be here, and so we locked them all in the entire month because we had the month available. And if we have it in September, we'll still be here. And we'll extend it for another reason, maybe El Grito and the Bracero event, and things that happen, right? But it's an opportunity to educate our community. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm here because of the importance of the civil rights, of the Voting Rights Act, and I think that it serves to remind us that our country has not always been perfect. So often you hear politicians say, only in America. Meaning that anything is possible in America. Well, it's possible only if we work hard at it. And we have seen a lot of discrimination in voting. And as we know, it came about only because, frankly, people lost their lives to earn the vote for others. That's number one. Number two is that we still have a lot to do. A democracy can't work. Democracy is a very difficult form of government. I'll give you an example. When I was with the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, we had hearings because an officer had killed a minority, happened to be Chinese American. And there were so many people that came to the hearing, they couldn't fit into the auditorium that we were having the hearing in, and we had to set up a loudspeaker outside for the people to hear. Nonetheless, every public official that came before us said basically, we support the police. And they had run a survey that indicated that 90% of the people in that community, that happened to be Santa Rosa, supported the police. So obviously every politician is going to support the police, right? They want 90% of the vote. The trouble is that in a democracy and a police department has a duty to protect 100%, not just 90%. So democracy is not perfect, and we have to work at it to improve the lives of all of us. And the Voting Rights Act was one of those steps that we took forward to protect the lives of all of us as Americans. So here we are today, but yet there are a great many problems having to do with voting. In fact, the Supreme Court has just set aside 3 years ago, the important part of the Voting Rights Act, and immediately something like 17 states have passed law that makes it more difficult for people to vote. So it's not a matter of the past, it's a matter of what we can do now and what we can do in the future. So to me, it's very important, and when I was invited to come, that's why I accepted the invitation right away. Like most of us, we're all very busy. I've got other things that I could have been doing today. It was important enough to come down here from Davis, near Sacramento, to participate.
And I'm here because we didn't finish the job. I was a teenage civil rights worker. I was amazingly fortunate to have been able to be trained by Martin Luther King, Jose Williams, Ralph Abernathy, Stokely Carmichael, John Lewis.
You mean all those suspicious guys?
All those suspicious guys. I was not any of their girlfriend, just on the record. I was dating another white Jew from California. So anyway, I always say just on the record, so people know. And we were the little foot soldiers, the helpers to those leaders and those community leaders. But in the community where I worked in Wilcox County, and this photo on my book jacket is of people that I personally knew and worked with, being, in this case, they would alternate between throwing tear gas and smoke bombs, and then they would laugh when the students ran from the smoke bombs to humiliate them, to try to stop their demonstrations, not just violently, but by, teenagers who are very subjected to how you feel about things, and being made a fool of is like really almost as bad as being shot at, right? Worse. And these things were happening all over the South because they did not want black people to vote, because they were in the majority in these counties. And when we arrived and joined their struggle, they embraced us as white allies. And I think it's something that white people are very poor at these days is understanding the role of white allies. It's not going to be the same as it was. There is too much water under the bridge. There also has been huge empowerment in communities of color. Our roles are going to be even more subdued and in the background than they were appropriately. But it doesn't mean that there's no role, because we still have access to resources and to power that we can leverage on behalf. But I not only myself risked my life and was at the end of a point of a gun and arrested and running from the Klan, but I had friends, close friends that I'm still friends with, that we went back and had a reunion where they were beaten. One of the young men was very promising in school, and I still remember seeing him with a slash in his forehead. He was 16 years old. He couldn't vote till he was 21, but he cared that much about his family being able to vote, about getting desegregated schools, about getting access to health care and other resources. And my passion about being here today is exactly what Justice Reynozo was speaking to, is that these 17 states who have rolled back, in fact we call them voter suppression laws, which are deliberately aimed to keep the most progressive people, poor, people of color, people with disabilities, people who change address often, which makes it really hard to re-register and always have your current, people who might not have ID. In Arizona, for example, I'm sure most of you know this, one of the sickening things is you can't use a student ID, but you can use your gun license to vote. I mean, this kind of thing just outrages me, and I thought I was, I didn't think I was done. I've always registered voters and so forth, but I thought I was done being outraged, but I'm re-outraged. And I'm very proud that my nephew is here today, representing the entire youth of the county at this point. But, and I know that young people do care, but we had to go out, and many of you have spoken today about going door to door. What is the relevance to your life? And Juan, you spoke about that very eloquently, about things that were done during the Chavez movement, is what is it that will make a difference to me? And we need to get young people who have paid jobs to organize other people. We can't expect everybody to be volunteers. When I was a student volunteer, I could live on $25 a month. I shared a room with a bunch of girls. We, had part-time jobs that paid a living wage. We went to free college, free public education, no student loans. It was a different world, and we need to empower our young people to feel that they belong to society, and that society belongs to them, and that society is beholden to them through the vote. And I feel very passionately about that, and I am just thrilled and honored to be here with these leaders.
And not all change is good. Like her, when I went to college, I paid nothing. I teach at a law school. Now the students are paying $50,000 a year. So they end up with big debts and all that. So not all change is good. And we have to struggle to make the change that come about to be a lot better, frankly.
One of the challenges that we faced in agricultural and regional or rural areas is that after we actively go door to door and register people to vote, do the absentee ballot, make sure that they're citizens, do all the stuff that we're trained to do. Here in the rural communities, everybody picks up and leaves right before November, right? So you get the end of the season, October, by then people are packing up to leave, right? They're all packing up to leave to go to Huron and Yuma and back to Texas or Arizona because of the crop and their livelihood. They got to do that. So here we registered everybody, now everybody's gone. So it's like thousands of people in Monterey County, that thousands, literally thousands, it affects every election.
But even that is subject to change. A law could be changed to allow people to vote absentee earlier so they don't
That's right.
lose their vote, So everything can change to the better or to the worse. And our job is to do as much as we can to have it change for the better.
Yeah, it's an issue that's out there. We're just bubbling it and making it happen. It's out there.
The things that the three of you have all mentioned is like your catalyst to get you out there and being young people and like how that spurred you to be active, right? When I did my Google research about each of you, Mr. Reynozo, I found out that when you were young, you organized a petition about getting mail delivered to where you were growing up.
Well, yes.
And you grew up in a segregated community, so how did your experiences growing up push you to be where you're at today?
You know, I've thought a lot about that, and I think I figured out why. I really believed what the teachers told me. I believed what the patriotic songs that we sang every day, particularly in the 5th and 6th grade in a segregated school, where all those things talked about freedom and equality and all that. I really believed that. So when I saw things that didn't seem right to me, didn't seem equal, I had what I used to call my justice bone, and my justice bone hurt, and I had to do something to relieve that hurt. And so I did what you mentioned in terms of the post office, and many other things after that, you know. And in fact, I'm still doing that. I tell people that I'm very conservative because I was born and raised in Orange County. And I'm conservative because I really have not changed my basic philosophy since I was a little boy. And it is to try to bring a little bit of justice to the world.
And Maria, the same thing I had found out about you. I found a really great quote where you said, I felt obligated as a white person to put my body on the line. So when I had read about you were at San Francisco, from my understanding, and all of this was going on around you. So what made you decide, let me leave behind all of my comfort and my education and all of my everything that was perfect in the world? You decided to put it all out there and go walk the line.
You know, I had never thought about the following until I was asked about it from I think a high school girl. She asked, do you think it has helped you that you're light-skinned, even though you're Mexican? I really haven't thought about it because my name is so clearly Mexican, right? Cruz, Reynozo. So I had assumed that people knew what my ethnicity was. But of course, when people meet me without knowing what my name was, they wouldn't necessarily discriminate against me immediately. In thinking through that about that, I think it probably did help me. I seldom had discrimination directed at me. When I was in high school, one time a fellow student called me a dirty Mexican. And you know what? I wasn't even mad at him. I felt sorry for him that he was so ignorant. I did see a lot of discrimination against other Mexicans, but I seldom saw it directed at me. So it probably did help me that my folks came from Los Altos de Jalisco, where there are a lot of light-skinned Mexicans, you know. But it didn't help in terms of my sense of my justice bone, because, well, for example, I had been asked in high school to be in charge of a group of young Chicanos out of the barrio in a junior Y group, and so we went camping. We had projects to help the barrio and all kinds of good things. Then one day I was driving down the main street in La Habra. In the first car I ever bought, a 1931 Ford, and I saw two of my boys standing in front of a hall. So I turned around and asked them what was going on, and they said it's a school dance, and this was junior high. We had a segregated school up to the 6th grade, but not in junior high. So I said, wait a minute, this school's not segregated. You should be able to dance here. And no, first I asked them how much it was, and they said a dime. So you can tell us a few years ago. I said, here, I've got a dime, and they said, no, we have the money. They won't let us in because we're Mexican. And I said, well, that can't be true because you're in junior high and that's not segregated. And so I went in and talked to the fellow in charge, and he says, yeah, we won't let them in. We're afraid there's going to be a problem if we do. And so then I went to see the people who sponsored it, a service club. I found out who the officers were, and I went to see them to tell them what I had seen, and I thought that was the best way to have a dance. It was the first time I was invited to leave somebody's office. They weren't happy to hear from me. On the other hand, I didn't hear about a segregated school, segregated dance after that. So I just had a compulsion to try to do something when I saw something like that happen.
How about you, Maria?
So I guess I was born with a justice bone.
You beat me.
No, I have a few years afterwards, but not too many. But I didn't come from a family of privilege and comfort. I came from a very uncomfortable family, and a lot of difficulties, especially towards girl children in my family. And I was surrounded by relatives, my father's brothers, who had chosen dairy farming and had more money than us. And the extent of that was such that one of my uncles would drive one of my cousins to school in a gold Cadillac and pass me while I was waiting for the school bus. So when you're a kid, your sense of injustice is very personal.
Yeah.
And so I identified from an early age with people who were being mistreated. I also, being a baby boomer, born exactly in 1946, came right into that first wave of post-World War II. I'm in Petaluma in Sonoma County, which is only 45 miles north of San Francisco, living in a rural area, being bused into Petaluma schools, where also the city kids would hold their nose when we got off the bus and go, "Pee-wee, the farmers are here." You know, so it didn't matter whether you had a farm or not, you were still being treated like this. But in elementary school, which was in Pen Grove, that we just walked to a mile away, you know, a bunch of 5- and 6-year-olds walking to school by ourselves with nobody supervising us both ways, but we did. Kids I went to school with had grandmothers who had either perished or had just gotten out of the concentration camps in Germany, who had numbers on their arms. So I was hearing these stories about Jewish persecution. And also I went to school with a goodly number of people who had just come out of the Japanese internment camps right here in California. And so we kids, and I'm still friends with 5 of my kindergarten friends from there. And we talk about how we would talk about how wrong it was that people were treated differently. And there was one Catholic kid who used to say, you know, the Jews killed Jesus, and we'd say, that is so not true, that was Romans, don't you know, you idiot? And, you know, and we were just like little kids, so we had this consciousness. Then I went to San Francisco State, so I thought this formative was like set in me. Plus my grandmother on my mother's side came from Quakers who were involved in the Underground Railroad to help people escape from slavery. So I had all this kind of legacy but no formal training. I go to San Francisco State. It's 1965. Students for Democratic Societies there. Bettina Epthecker's on campus. Buffy St. Marie. The Native American movement comes. I'm Mario Savio and so forth. And then the Selma Bloody Sunday happens. And Martin Luther King comes on television and he says, we need you to come south this summer. And to me, it was just like that recruitment ad from Uncle Sam. Like he was personally speaking to me and had a project set up specifically like the Freedom Summer the summer before, where the 3 young men were murdered, had a project set up to come deliberately to sign up for 10 weeks and go help with voter registration in the South. They gave us phenomenal, phenomenal training. So it was a matter of where I had a justice bone to start with. I had personal mistreatment to agitate that justice bone. And then I had examples of courage, and then there was a moment in history, and I just was there and took the road. I could have said, I gotta wash my hair or do my homework or stay with my boyfriend, but you know, it's just that crossroads.
But you know, I'm reminded that I think kids actually do generally have a strong sense of justice. Whenever the parents do something they don't consider quite just, wait a minute, no. So
That's true.
I think we do. I think maybe the difference is that some decide to do something about it, and most will not. But I think kids do have a sense of justice. Yeah. So.
Do I wait for your question? Or?
So why were you a troublemaker?
Yeah. Can I be called troublemaker by some real honorable people? It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And basically, I grew up a good old boy in Gonzales. Played Little League and Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. Tried to learn my English as well as I could because I was told by both my parents, an English-speaking person and another person. Well, my English, my dad spoke 7 different languages, All that I credit his ability to make his life. He was born in 1905. All the immigrants in 1905 were not Mexican. They weren't Indian. They weren't, they were Anglo. So they came in speaking Italian, Swiss, Portuguese, German. This is Gonzales, Salinas Valley. He grew up down there in 1905, knew all the immigrants. He was talking Spanish and English. He learned all these different languages. And he made his way and he made friends and all that. I was born in 52, so I got to learn a lot of their kids, right? Because I went to their kids' school. I wasn't born until 52, my dad was born in 05, so I was 48 years old by the time I was born. So everybody else who he made friends with, they were having kids at 20 and 30. So I got to know the grandkids of it. So I knew the grandfathers because of my dad. He'd take me around. I'm junior, by the way. So I'm the little guy, the mini-me, so here we go. So I'm beginning to learn all these guys, and sprechen Sie Deutsch, Schnitz als kaputt, and all this German stuff that we learned. Excuse me. But, it wasn't always good. We learned about the history, learned about the fairy styles, all that stuff. But a significant thing happened in history in 1963. And there was a Bracero accident. 32 people died. We're on the way back from from Salinas, headed to Gonzales. I'm 11 years old. So after playing Little League and all that, I'm a good old boy and all that, knew about justice, what's right and wrong, and learned by my abuelita, who was born in 1882, and she died in 74. And we're looking 63, so I got to know her at least 10 years from that accident. So when people ask me, so what got you involved? And I tell people, back in 63, there was this big accident. And I got all emotional, and I said, man, this is, all these dead Mexicans all over the place. Excuse me. So when we stopped, my mom was crying. My dad runs out, being a World War II veteran and knew about first aid CPR. He was a fireman or firefighter, City of Gonzales, and that. So he runs out to try to help and could do whatever he could do. And then when he saw the firemen and everybody showing up, he jumps back in the car and took us into town back home to get us out of there. And then he comes back with the firemen and all that, and police officers who knew him. They picked him up at his house. And we're all worried what's going on. So that stayed with me the rest of my life. Every time I go up and down the highway, and so I'm in Gonzales, Chulos, right between Salinas and, right? So I have to go by there every day. So it was something passionate and emotional for me. Yeah. So that's what got me involved. My mom would always say, you gotta help your people. You gotta help your people. Mexicanos, she was talking about, because she saw the UFW picking up and doing all the stuff they were doing, and I'm still developing, growing up, trying to figure out what girls are about and what cars are about, and here in Vietnam is getting us ready to do what we're going to do there. So the injustice of what we saw and how people were being treated was a big deal. So I got involved with just wanting to, let's say, keep my mom from having to be hiding behind a jacket so she could relieve herself for personal stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And we were all, the women didn't have a toilet, men don't have a toilet. We had drinking water, we all had to drink out of the same cup, the same container, just like that, a la brava, just doing it down and drinking it. So it was something that was passionate for me, and I've always stayed with that. I was a tatamudo, so I struggled a lot with talking, and sometimes I can't shut up now. But I missed a lot of schools. I'm not the best educated person. But that's I learned a lot from my mom, who said, man, qué triste, tan bien educado y tan pendejo. So well-educated, so dumb, so stupid. Well-educated people come out, masters and PhDs, and they don't know anything, but yet you pick up people from the community, from the barrio, from the farm, from the fields, and they're the most educated people. They're respectful, they're humble, they'll give you your place, and you get the educated ones, they get out of the way, you're a nobody. So it was that injustice that kind of made me who I am today. So we needed to teach young people about their history, their past, to connect them to a place and time so that they feel that they have a place that they can say, this is what we're about. Whether they're here or anywhere else, this is what we're about. And they don't have to go to a gang to figure out what they're about. We had to get gang members and educate them on all this stuff, and they'll be the best organizers. You got to see these guys organize, and some of them are my friends. They're great organizers, which is, good and bad there on that one.
So so you guys get all involved when you're very young in what you do, and so Maria, you chose to write. I know Mr. Reynozo that you teach. I know Juan that you go into the community places like the library and schools and you share this story. So when you guys look at young people today, how do you feel? Do you feel hopeful? Like, is there a message that you want them to embrace, to sort of follow in your footsteps, or what is the dynamic you see for kids today versus what you experienced as a youth organizer and advocate and troublemaker?
Well, I'd like to speak for Black Lives Matter, since even though this is a voting rights anniversary, as we can see, there are no visible African Americans among us, although most of us carry African heritage somewhere in our bones. And I've been very impressed. In fact, they just had a big convention in Cleveland with thousands of young people. It's being done through social media, so it reaches people who do social media, which is going to be a little, more connected, but I think that's broader across income and race than it used to be. And I think that gives me a lot of hope. In fact, I've heard and read some of their things that make me feel that they're, unlike Occupy, which was mostly white kids, that the black kids understand the need to have hierarchy and structure and come up with some elected leaders and some talking points. So I'm hoping that they can give a page from the book of community organizing. Plus they are drawing on Congressman John Lewis and the other living civil rights people, Diane Nash and so forth. So I see in the black youth, the outrage is so fresh because of all the murders, and people are really seriously upset. They're educated, they're socially connected, and they're getting organized. And it pains me that the movements are so racially segregated, because even in our county, I belong to the NAACP, and I'll go to the North County, and it's only blacks and Anglo-Sudeos. And I go to South County, and it's only Latinos, and then a handful of us, we call them the usual suspects. There's like 6 of us elders, Bob Fitch and me and Jenkins, and this handful of people that will always be there, and nobody else is there. And I keep saying to white people, don't wait to be invited. Don't wait. Martin Luther King probably isn't going to call you. I'm sorry to say. I was lucky. It was an accident of history. But get over yourself and go volunteer. Go see what you can do to help. If you don't want to go, if you don't want to intrude, donate. If you can do that. So I feel optimistic because I do see young people. I feel incredibly proud of our Cesar Chavez Democratic Club. We have our current chair, Lupe Rivas, is here today with us. And when Luis Alejo and I started that in 2002 in Watsonville, our goal was to get more young Latinos involved, and we have. And he became mayor, and then the assemblyman, his now wife, then girlfriend became mayor, and will probably become assemblywoman, God willing. So we see the results. So to me, I have hope. But it also, we need to diversify it much more. It's just a small, and I just have to say this one thing. I hate to refer to the Republican debates, but I am so sick of the Republicans hijacking the language. The political class, what the F is the political class? I mean, are we the political class? Are people who want to run for office the political class? They take the language and distort it to make it seem like it's a bad thing to want to be an elected representative, instead of saying, political activists. And we need to take back the language in English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, whatever, and reclaim progressivism for this country. I just feel and I think more young people would care if they were participating in creating the language. And I feel confident that they will.
I'm optimistic also. I teach at a law school where we have a special ceremony for students who have done a lot of pro bono work and community work and all that while they're students, and that's not easy to do because that's a pretty demanding area of study. And about half of the graduates always get that award. So a lot of young people are are interested in doing what's wrong, if you will. So I can't help but be optimistic that once they are out practicing law, they will continue to be active in the community and active in the profession. So I have no reason to not be optimistic. I think I am by nature an optimistic person. But as I say, I see the reality, I think, of what's happening with young people. There are many areas where so much work needs to be done. I think I may have mentioned earlier that I have sometimes taught a seminar to true freshmen, 17 and 18-year-olds, about the fact that young people are the poorest registered and poorest voters percentage-wise. So we obviously have a lot of work to do with many of the young people. But at the same time, as I say, I see, at least half of the folk who are going to graduate from law school already getting awards for all of the pro bono and community activity that they've been involved in. So I think that young people, particularly if encouraged, will continue to do the good work that hopefully many of us are doing now. And indeed, I've always felt that in society there are at least three different classes. Those who are very powerful politically and economically, who are perfectly happy with the world. A far greater group that are not. And then there's a group in between that have enough gumption or enough education to try to do something about it. And as I see it, I just happen to by accident, not design, fall in the middle group that I've talked about. But we've had people in that middle group forever. Think of the people who worked for decades to get rid of slavery, for example. Think of the women who worked again for decades to get the right to vote. These things don't happen overnight, but you need a group of folk who are working at those issues, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm 84 years old. I know that for many of the things that I've worked for probably won't come to fruition in my lifetime. But I don't think that matters. I think what matters is that I happen to belong to that group. Others will belong to it. Many young people, including those who are graduating from law school, will belong to their group, and they'll carry on to get our country and our society to be a little bit better than what it is now.
One of the things that Juan had mentioned was the value of Western education and going to institutions and being part of the system versus an education in the fields or in the home and in your culture. But when you look at things like Prop 47 and legislation and what's going on with Obama, how do you guys see the role of formal education being paired with sort of that justice bone and that community education that each of you grew up with?
Well, I could just jump in real quick and say something about the youth and their involvement and then your question. My whole involvement in organizing in Salinas had been with young people. I was young, and my dad would tell me, yell at us because we were good for nothing, right? Because we were too busy trying to do other things that young people were doing. And he was older guy. He was like he would have been like grandfather to me, right? If you look at the dates. But you guys are good for nothing. When I was your age, I used to pound on the table and tell us how I used to walk in the snow and all that. The stories, barefooted, and hunting and killing and doing. We're Native Americans to some extent, and we practiced the skills of doing what our ancestors taught us, including my grandma. So, especially my grandma, because she lived right next door. She made sure that we learned all that stuff, and my uncle. So, I did have a lot of experience with young people in the early 70s, where a lot of stuff happened. We're going to have an exhibit here about how the lowriders in Monterey County help impact the Voting Rights Act, and how these car clubs, who were just a bunch of people hanging out, now formed into car clubs, and those car clubs spread from King City all the way to Pájaro. They helped create Lowrider Magazine, and we were targeting the young Chicano lowriders by putting absentee ballots and voter registration inside the first 4 lowrider magazines. So the whole effort has been to try to get young people involved. And one of the things that Cesar always said to us organizers and wannabe organizers was, the best organizer is the enemy. The best organizer is the enemy. Because why? They're creating a situation that's going to upset you enough to get off your behind and to go do something.
Talking about Trump?
That's an example that Salvador gave, exactly. you know, you antagonize people with these things and they'll move. So that's what we need is figure out what are the things that help out that community move into just becoming registered. If they become registered, then we know where they live, we can go knock on their door. They don't have to vote, they can tell us all the bad reasons why, you know, even us older folks are leery about it, we know what the reality is. So we have to up the ante by getting more people who agree with us. How do we do that if we can't find them, if they're not registered? It's just about registration and getting the vote out for young people.
Ask you one question about this registration? Since you mentioned the problem of people filling out the registration but not hanging around to mail it in or to vote, could you actually collect absentee ballots before people left and then just mail them?
Well, that's exactly what we did in the Cecil Green election, where we had those 22,000 absentee ballots, and walk till you drop. Well, we were walking till we dropped to pick up the ballots, as you said. But because of that election, there was the Senate decided they're going to give away, believe it or not, green donuts. Green donuts, right? Our candidate was Cecil Green. You're going to give away green donuts if you show up with a stump that you voted. So you go to these Winchell guys or wherever the donut place was, and you get your dozen donuts because you voted. And that's what they did. So the legislature or somebody, I forget how exactly it happened, but they decided, no more of that. So you'll see somewhere after 1988, the law was passed that said, hey, you can't do that no more, entire state. Because that's what we were doing. We're actually going out picking up the ballots. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody would drive me, this is what happened, somebody would drive me to the house. I'd run out, pick up the thing, and if we got three, and we usually have 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 people or residents down the street. So I'd run over to those other houses, and we'd have somebody at the office calling that somebody is out there running around, don't shoot. You know, we're talking about videos here, don't shoot. And we gotta, you know, we're dressed a certain way to they knew who we were, and then we made contact with all the homeboys so that they knew we were in the neighborhood. So we're knocking on the doors 1 o'clock in the morning. Why at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning? Because that's when the packing sheds get out of work. You look at all the packing sheds here, they work you till noon, 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, then they'd send you home. So when do we get the ballot? When the lady's asleep? When the husband's, no, you gotta go at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we have that historically recorded, and that was our challenges. But we had the energy to do it, and we knew we could. If you know you could do it, the only thing stopping you from doing it is what? Doing it. Getting out and making it happen. You have to envision you know, these guys here, they envision stuff. They envision stuff that we're all standing on their shoulders now because of what they did. You know, so it was a vision, but they followed through with that vision. And that's what these young people have to see. They have to have a vision, and I can do this.
And since we have the Santa Cruz County Elections Clerk here, Gail, could you clarify for us how we can best legally get those absentee ballots in?
So if the voter has the ballot in early October, you want to encourage them to mail it or give it to a relative who can then return it on their behalf. And there's an authorization on the envelope that allows a household member or child, parent, to return a ballot for somebody. Or call your local registrar, because if I knew, we go out to residential care facilities, for example. So we'll go out in the community where we know there's a good, large number of voters, and we would go out to a facility and collect, ballots if they had them, so. But you'd want to coordinate that with your elections department.
But you can no longer go around and...
You can no longer, the ballots cannot be picked up by campaigns or,
But you can't just put them in the mail?
Yeah,
You can't just mail
the
them off?
voter can. The voter can return it by mail.
Or to have one designated person that would do that for them.
Yeah.
But they have to sign off.
It has to be a household member or a relative who returns a ballot for the person.
But who knows if you just stick it in the mail?
Don't over that.
She doesn't want to hear about it.
Who knows? Exactly.
But the law says that the ballot shall be returned by the voter, or the voter may authorize
So
a household
I won't be
member
doing
or
that.
something else.
No,
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna see you on the news, running through the streets with Juan, driving the birthday. So.
Following him, the ballots before his hand touches them.
Yeah, we had at least 10, 20 people doing that. So you
Well,
can imagine
and
we're all
I
over
think where we're going, just with the mail ballot, I mentioned that earlier with this SB 450, which is the vote center bill. And a lot more counties are doing this anyway because more people are voting by mail now than going to the polls. So what we're looking at doing is having those, you know, like the traditional style mailbox or some kind of a mail drop box location throughout. Like in Watsonville, we have one, we use the city utility box where they have utility bills, they also collect ballots. And we have a box out in front of the county building. So in our county, we only have 2. But you will see, if all goes well, we will up that number in 2016 to have these freestanding boxes that are secure and picked up every day for people to just drive up and drop it off at 2 a.m. and maybe that route on their way home from the plant, they'll be right there so they can just drive up and drop it in that box.
And who knows who dropped it off?
That's right.
Whose arm is that? Let's look at the cam.
There'll be a camera. Well, yeah, some of the rules are.
A lot of
security
hats.
cameras.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
Are we moving it all to more of a online voting, registering and voting?
Ouch.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, you know the push the button, huh?
Online, not online voting. I
Right.
do believe there might be a point where someone can get a ballot electronically and then vote it and then put it in an envelope
That's
and
what
then
I'm-
mail it. You know, but as far as internet voting, I
Okay.
would say not even in my lifetime. And I'm young.
What about with a thumbprint ID?
I don't think so, but yeah, it's not so much the ID as the corruption, as the, being able to tap in and change it.
When I was on the Commission on Civil Rights, we had hearings on this issue. And our conclusion after quite a few hearings was that the safest ballot was actually the old paper ballot. And that the voting machines, we categorized them on which ones would be the best ones to make sure that there were no mistakes. But actually, we actually concluded that the safest in terms of not making mistakes was actually the old-fashioned where you filled in a little box yourself.
Yeah, actually, it's harder to make a mistake on the touchscreen because it doesn't allow you to overvote, and there's not different creative marks. I mean, you have to touch your choice, and your choice is your choice. But it is on the internet side too. I did go to a conference one time where they were talking about, and this is way beyond my level of expertise, but a whole new internet, like they're going to build a new internet, and this new internet would have a lot more security features. And if they do launch this whole new, built from the ground up internet system, that might have the security measures necessary for online voting, but I still think that's a ways off. But yeah, we get creative written stuff on the ballot. We get lots of messages to us, and we get a lot of creative people doing different things on their ballot and write-ins and stuff. And yeah.
And just to expand on the internet deal is there's a thing called internet addressing, and so right now we're on IPv4 and we're going to switch over to IPv6. Actually, Europe
What language
quite a
are you
bit,
speaking?
which will allow everybody to have their own individual address, and that will isolate and individuate people and make sure that that is coming from
That
the.
sounds like something I
And can we identify your voice for the record, please? Because the camera is.
Who is that behind the camera?
Who is that?
Yeah, Wes White says this, so if I'm wrong, then get me.
And did you have another question?
Well, we had hearings on the Florida election.
Oh, yeah.
When Bush got elected, and with the help of his brother and others who were co-chairs for his campaign. And it was amazing the many ways in which people can be prevented from voting. Let's put it that way. So even now, and indeed, the law in Florida was exactly like the law in California. That is, if you could tell what the person intended to vote for, that was a vote. So I could never understand all this discussion about the hanging chads that they talked about in those days, because if a person had hit that that shed and it was partially open, clearly the person meant to vote for that. So that was not the, in my view, that was not the issue. The real issue that there were so many other techniques of keeping people from voting under the Florida election practices. I don't even want to say the law, practices, that the whole election turned out to be, from our investigation, a sham, really.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When I first started in Santa Cruz County in 1993, we had the punch card system, a marker vote system that they punched the cards. And my first election, standing there, as the ballots were going through the machines, is that the chads were flying out of the machines. And I'm like, what is going on? You know, we had a vacuum cleaner to vacuum them up so they don't get into the machine. And so I was quite stunned by seeing this, and I learned a lot about chads. So I switched our voting system in Santa Cruz County to a marker vote system where you actually had a pen and to actually mark your ballot to eliminate those flying chads, because it was different, because like a voter will start to, and then go, oh, I don't want that one, I want the one below it, you know, because their eyes don't line up necessarily, so they might have poked that first chat a little bit, enough to give it disconnection, and then really poke the second one, and then in the course of counting it and handling it, that other one flies off, so now we have two voting marks where you're only supposed to vote for one. Anyway, I got really into the Chad discussion. I became an expert on Chad in 1993.
And I was working for a senator where the vote was so close that they had a recount. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to represent him, and the opponent appointed somebody to represent them. We went through all, and the vote was only about half a dozen difference. So we went over every vote carefully. We didn't disagree on one vote. That is, even if a person had not put their mark right on the box, if it was right by it, we knew that they intended to vote for that. But I read the law in Florida, and the law there read exactly the way it did in California. So I thought the whole thing was sort of a fraud, frankly, in Florida, because if you could tell who the person intended to vote for, that should have been in.
Right.
Yeah. So the whole thing turned out to be a great disaster, because the Florida Supreme Court then had the issue went up to the Florida Supreme Court. And they issued a very good opinion, I thought, and then the U.S. Supreme Court took it over and decided the case, and they had no business doing that, frankly. So the whole thing was a disaster. But frankly, the people I blamed for were the Secretary of State, the governor, and others that basically allowed much of that to happen.
We had a situation here in Monterey County that was historical in that trying to keep people from voting or not counting the ballot. Trying to stay on that discussion is that we had the elections department. The wife of the elections director was part of the Pajarone, newspaper, and they found out, the Pajarone found out somehow that I would suspect it was the husband, found out that there was a lot of absentee ballots were coming in, and they were stacking them up inside the post office. Hundreds of them were being stacked up because we could pick them up and take them in, right? So we'd come in with 30, 40 at a time, you know, and we'd harvest, and we call it harvest of the vote here in Monterey County, by the way. Called harvest of the vote for the civil rights people out there might be looking at the video. We found out that the elections department decided not to pick up the ballots on election day. So it was like about 3 o'clock. Whatever ballots were left at the post office, already in the boxes, ready for them to come pick up, and they didn't pick them up. So there was 382 ballots, and we had 29 candidates running at the same time, because this is 1982. So in 1982, we ran all these candidates because we had the lowrider car clubs and parents and the activists and the retired braceros were all into wanting to get people onto these school boards. So we had 29 candidates, and we had quite an absentee ballot effort. So we had a bunch of absentees were being counted, and yet there's this whole crate, or maybe 2 crates, of absentees that were left at the elections, because we had a Filipino friend who wanted to make sure that one of the Filipino candidates got their ballot, and they said, hey, we have all these ballots and no one's picking them up. So we actually had to go and get a judge to tell the election guy, even though it's past this hour, your obligation is to pick up your ballots. And he compared it to a bill. Just because they send you the bill and you don't open the mail, or don't get you still got the bill. You know you have to pay. What's the problem, right? So the problem here was the deadline. Did they receive it by a certain day? And the law is, technically is, hey, if it's sent, it's considered received. You know, it's your fault that you didn't pick up in the mail. So that's how we got those ballots counted. But they had to go all the way to the judge and everything else. There's all this stuff going on, but we looked at it as a racial thing because on the newspaper the caption says Mexicanos or absentee ballots mount up, you know, like 300% and blah blah blah, and it looks like a Mexican revolución, and they use that phrase, a Mexican revolución, at the polling place, and they told a story about what we're doing. So they revealed to everybody before election day that this was going on. And then we found out after that, about 4 days after, hey, here's all these ballots. So they're constantly trying to keep us from voting, trying to keep the ballots from being counted, one thing or another, trying to keep us out of the picture. Because as elected officials, we all want to make sure that our campaigns do what we do, our organizers do what they do, and then to find out that they're being sabotaged in the newspaper a week before the election, telling everybody who typically doesn't vote at school boards, typically they don't vote, right? We know that. Now they're all excited. Oh shoot, we're not going to let those Mexicans take over our board, right? That's what the message was to us, because the Pajaronian services a certain geographic area that's demographically not in our favor. So it was the demographics we were concerned about. And then we're looking at the newspaper saying, hey, they're routing up all their folks to get out and vote. Meanwhile, they're suppressing ours by not counting the ballot, because they said, well, it's at the post office, it's after 8 o'clock, we don't have to count it. Or after 5, whatever it was, closing time. We said, no, not closing time at 8 o'clock. Closing time, I mean, not 5 o'clock, it's after election, and the post office is there. You guys didn't pick up the boxes of ballots. And so we got them to do that, but had to go to court.
I wanted to be cognizant of time, because
Yes.
my understanding is folks have obligations to be places by 4 o'clock. So I wanted to thank you guys for being here and everyone for coming and asking questions. And if you want to stick around and chat, that's fine, but I wanted to release our speakers to go and take care of the obligations that need to take care of. But thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go, I came in late and I apologize because I didn't know your timeline. Can I ask a question of you guys, and if you have the time?
Hang out, yeah.
Yeah, if you have the time to answer it. And I'm sorry, I'll introduce myself, Margaret Benetti. I work on a lot of issues here locally in Salinas, you know me.
Former elected school board member, Salinas High School.
Margaret, maybe we can have these conversations offline and individually so people who need
I
to
still,
leave can leave.
if it's okay with the panel, because I think it's important for everybody to hear this. So if it's okay, if I can ask just one question.
If we're condensed.
Right,
I will set a timer for 2 minutes.
sounds good. Sounds good. So the question is this, locally, some of the issues, one of the big issues happening on city council surrounds dynamics and the city council itself, the relationships, which are not very good and have been printed about. One of the particular city council members who represents East Salinas has, I guess, has caused some, there's controversy with the rest of the council members on what that council member has done or what they think he should do or so on and so forth, which I think a lot of it are just regular politics, period. The city is looking at proposing and putting changing the charter. And in that proposal to change the charter, one of the things that really struck my attention is that they would like to change the charter so that anyone who owes any debt whatsoever, either to the city or to the county or to the state, could then be vacated from their position, could be basically, I think, voted off by the rest of the council. And I think this is another form of voter suppression, of another form of what goes on in the other states, where, controlling the votes that people cannot, because it's usually economically just, people that are economically oppressed that owe debt. And so, how do you see this if you don't? Or maybe somebody already brought it up, I apologize.
My sense is this is unconstitutional.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because we have a whole tradition of not punishing people who are indebted. And so striking is probably unconstitutional if it goes through.
That was perfect, and there's 20 seconds.
I told you it wouldn't take
So-
very long.
All right. Thank you guys for everything.
Thank you.